started the paintings not until May, when I kind of panicked and thought, oh, I better do something for this show. And ended up doing the courtyard of my new home, which I really love. So it was really a very easy portfolio to put together in a lot of ways, because it was a subject matter that I really cared about and was excited because it was new. So that gave me a lot of impetus to get this body of work together. And I was only going to start, I was hoping I could get 10 paintings done from about May to really August, when I needed to have everything ready, framed and ready to go for the show. And there were actually going to be 4 of us, and then one of the artists decided not to show, and I thought, now there are 3 of us and I'll have to have more work, so what do? I've got to paint more. And then we did get, luckily, Steve to come and join us. Thank you very much for volunteering to do that. But at the same time, the museum, LASM, had seen some of this work and wanted me to show in a landscape show there, so I thought, oh, I still need a lot more. And then there were a few pieces that I didn't really think fit in with the rest of the paintings, and so I knew I had to edit, and ended up doing much more, and was fortunate to be able to do much more than what I originally thought I would do. But it's all watercolor. I start with the line drawing in pen of the basic forms, and then start painting, and then I kind of go back through and pull out other shapes and other colors. And I wasn't really thinking about a coloring book when I did them, and the title didn't come until after the whole thing was done. I was just going to call it Kleinert Courtyard. The home was right here on Kleinert, so I thought, well, that's really kind of boring, but that is what it is. But then after the more I thought about it, I came up with the title Color Book, and thought that was much more appropriate to what it was. But I wanted to do something that was somewhat recognizable and somewhat abstract. So you'll notice that there are things that you can recognize, like architecture and the wall and some of the pots and tables and that kind of thing. But I also wanted something that was really much more abstract and even non-objective, in combination with some things that were recognizable. It's not realism, but it's recognizable. The table that you see, I'll just give this little anecdote. The table that's in here with the curly Q chairs was one that my grandfather had a restaurant in New Orleans, and the marble came, it's a marble top table with an iron base, and the marble came from his restaurant many, many years ago. And my mother made the table, which was her father's marble. And she made the table in probably the early to mid 60s. And it was one thing that I inherited, and so it's a very nostalgic, and I feel very connected to that little table. And I just love those little, for the painting, I don't really like the chairs necessarily, because they're very feminine, because my mother was very, very girly. But I liked them in the painting, so that was, and it kind of gave a very whimsical form for the paintings. But many of you know that I'm primarily a stained glass artist, and so, and I really wasn't thinking about stained glass either when I did these, but they do have a very strong connection to that. Although many of the shapes that you see in here could never be cut in glass. So, but anyway, that's kind of it in a nutshell about kind of how I got to the work and what the work is about. It's, again, watercolor and pen and ink on paper. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer anything.
Well, what seasons do these span that you're able to get out in your courtyard and work?
Well, actually, I did them in the studio, and I worked for photographs. And I just bought the home in January. So most of these are from late winter, early spring is when I took the photographs. And I actually did them in like May to August. So. Steve?
Yeah, I'm curious about your materials. Can you divulge your brands that you use of watercolor or paper or anything special that you use?
I can. The paper is Arches.
Okay.
It's a 140 pound, and I use a hot press paper because I like the smoother texture. Just because in the drawing of the ink pen, I don't get that rough surface, and so I can get a much cleaner line. So I use a hot press paper. And then the watercolor is a German watercolor. And I don't know anything about it except I had a little tin of this watercolor forever. And it is German, and I don't know the brand. But I also use some Pelican watercolor and have another little tin of some other brand.
So these little German things, the little watercolor fairies come in and bring you more each time.
No, it was, yeah, it was just a little, it's a little tin about this big, and it has 2 layers, and, you know, concentrated, dried watercolor.
Yeah.
And I've just used it for a long time. I'm kind of running out of some of the colors, particularly the red, and I think I'm out of one of the greens. But yeah, I'm a little nervous because I don't know if I can find it anymore. And that's a lot of times my problem is either they change the paper, or many of them have this experience. They've either changed the paper or changed the pencils that I use, and pastel or the watercolor or whatever. So, yes.
Which color do you put first on the paper?
That
Red
varies.
Varies?
It varies, and it's usually the one that I'm the closest to in reach.
Because
So-
when I have a coloring book when I was a child, I just use a red whenever I can find the space in the red, then move to the orange and the yellow. So I was just wondering how you put like a warm colors first and cool
It
colors.
kind of does depend. A lot of times I'll start usually up in the top, or because I work on watercolor paper, and to prepare the watercolor paper, you have to stretch it. So you wet the watercolor paper and then tape it down while it's wet. And when it dries, it shrinks, but because it's taped, it makes it very tight. And then you get a very smooth, flat surface. And then when you work with watercolor, then the water, of course, expands the paper again, but then when it dries, it goes back to that same shape. So therefore, you don't end up with the wavy. So and I work on an angle, just because that's the way you do watercolor, that flows better. So I'll usually start at the top and kind of work down, but it's not like I always start with the same color. It just depends on my mood and physically what's in reach.
Demystifying that.
Oh, yeah.
But I mean, you do obviously use a lot of warm colors for light and cool for shade.
Well, but not always. I've always kind of, and I don't really do this consciously, but I notice in my work, a lot of times I'll put cooler colors in the foreground or darker colors in the background. I don't know why I do that, but I notice that I have done it a lot. It's not like I'm using light, cool colors to create more perspective and darker, warmer colors in the front. Like in that second one, that blue water is pretty cool.
That's why I particularly like it, because the red comes forward, the blues and cools go back, so it abstracts everything.
Kind of flattens it out in some ways, but yeah, the drawing perspective, yeah. Techniques, I guess. And some of them are conscious and some are subconscious.
Do you have a personal favorite?
That's like asking a father which child is his favorite. There's some that I like better and feel are more successful than others. Some that I've had to struggle with that either I feel very good that I overcame the conflict that I had with it, or had to struggle with it so much that I never feel like it was totally resolved, although it was finished. So that's a hard question. Yeah, there's some that I kind of respond to more. I certainly will. That third one, there's something about that. It just seemed to, but the reason I like that one is because it worked without really thinking much about it. It seems like every time I picked up a color and put it down on the paper, it's just where it needed to be. On these first couple of ones, of course, this was the first one, and when I work, I title my work a series title, and then I just number them. It's just what I've always done, and it just is easier for me. So really, this is the order, and pretty much which I did them. They're numbered in order. Number 10 is out of order just because I wanted 3 horizontals right there. But it is the 10th painting in the series. And I think you can maybe see that I started out really loose, and then I started tightening up, which we as artists a lot of times, when we start getting into something, I notice I do. I start getting more detailed than I really kind of wanted to do in the beginning. And so I tried loosening back up, and I think by the time I got to that third one over there, I finally was able to loosen it up again more like the beginning ones. And so, I like them for different reasons. Some that, because that one was so easy to do, and these two because they were so loose, and really kind of what I intended. And for example, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6th one, which is the one I chose for the invitation, I felt like it was more indicative of the whole series. Because it's got some loose quality, it's got the color, it's got some of the spontaneity, and it's got some of the defined shapes, but it's not just one of those things. So I felt like that one was the best representative of the whole thing.